Anyone who's familiar with my channel knows that I love Berserk. I've read the manga at least 3-4 times over. I've watched the anime, the movies, basically any Berserk related media, I've found a way to consume it. But I must admit that I do have a gap in my knowledge, and that's in regards to the video games. Now, I am aware of the Sword of Berserk, Guts' Rage, the game that came out on the Dreamcast, specifically because it is considered canon within the Berserk universe. So I know about what happened in the story, I've actually watched some videos online, but I never actually got a chance to play the game itself. That's because it came out on the Dreamcast, and as of right now, I don't own a Dreamcast. And I've heard accounts that if you don't have a Japanese Dreamcast, you can't actually play the game all the way through, so it sort of leads me to believe that maybe it's just not the best game to buy. That being said, there's another game out there that's completely playable and on the PlayStation 4/5, and that one is called Berserk and the Band of the Hawk. Now, unlike the Sword of Berserk, Guts' Rage, this is not new information to the Berserk universe. It's actually just a retelling of the Berserk universe, starting with the Golden Age arc and going all the way to the Falcon of the Millennium Empire arc. Which I gotta say is very refreshing because anytime you see a retelling of Berserk, it always starts off with the Golden Age arc, which most of us agree it's the best arc in the manga itself, but we've heard it so many different times, it's kinda nice to see some new material. Now, some basic facts about the game itself, it's a Musou game developed by Omega Force, and it was originally released for the PlayStation 4, Vita, and PlayStation 3 in Japan. And like I said, it follows the manga series in which it starts with the Golden Age arc and goes all the way to the Falcon of the Millennium Empire arc. With a bit of a caveat. In the beginning of the game, which is almost like a tutorial mode, you start off in the Eclipse. And it's kind of a weird version of the Eclipse as well, because Guts is already the Black Swordsman at that point. Which, if you read the manga, he doesn't become the Black Swordsman until after the Eclipse. We know this based on the gear that he's wearing here, so it's kind of a weird mixture. I don't know why they did this exactly, but it is what it is. I mean, it's a cool aesthetic nonetheless. And the game employs a very simple format. Hack and slash. And when I say hack and slash, you literally do that a million different times. I mean, that's the name of the game, guys. You literally just mash the square button and the triangle button as much as you can in battle. It's not a lot of strategy like Baldur's Gate, which I just recently played and is absolutely fantastic. It's just a very simple concept. So you start off by picking your character. You could choose Judo, Casca, Griffith, Guts, and even Zod. However, each battle has its own specificities. So you don't just get free reign, you can't just choose whoever you want for that battle. Each battle has a particular character that you can choose. So after that, you go into your battle preparation. So you equip specific items that give you advantages in the battle in terms of attack and defense. And you can also buy these stones. Now these stones are very vital to the equipment itself because they help you build up the equipment. So each time that you go into a specific battle, you have 3 stones to buy. And you should buy the stones every single time because you have a ton of money and you can't really spend it on anything else. So you might as well just buy the stones. And you can only buy 3 of the stones at each battle, so you only can buy so much at a time. So it's in your best interest to buy the stones and upgrade your equipment. Afterwards, you can take a gander at the army information. In this screen, you can take a look at all your allies, and vice versa, take a look at all your enemies. It also gives you a helpful map to look at so that you can orient yourself for the upcoming battle. Now you'll notice throughout the game that you keep getting the same loot battle after battle, a lot of weaker items, and you're probably wondering to yourself, what the heck am I going to do with all this stuff? Well, don't sell it. See, what you could do is take 3 or 4 of those weaker items and amalgamate it into one of your stronger items, thereby giving you an even stronger item to use in battle. Then you have your Beyblade information. Now, this is a set of objectives for the actual battle itself. And by doing these objectives, you get more money, you get more loot, and you get more achievements for the game itself. If you're a completionist like myself and you want to get all those achievements, so it's really useful to know that.
Now, in terms of the story, the Golden Age arc is pretty much beat for beat what you expect to see from the anime and the movies, except for two big caveats. One being that we actually get to see what Guts is up to in that 1 year when he left the Band of the Hawk. So after he fights Griffith in that duel, we get to see what happens within that 1 year. Now in the manga, we get a little bit of a flashback to Goto and Erika, but we actually get to see Guts fighting some bandit thieves. There's actually a couple missions of this. And I would imagine in that 1 year that Guts had to keep himself sharp. He had to keep his skills finely tuned, so it makes sense for him to take on these odd jobs and fight off various people so that he could stay on the top of his game. The other big addition to this game that was left out of the anime and the movies, and one that I absolutely love because I've wanted to see this for so long, is the addition of Wyald. Yes, we get to see Wyald in this game, guys. And not only that, we get to fight him as well, in his human form and his apostle form. That's gotta be one of my favorite fights of the entire game itself, just because we haven't seen that fight in any sort of medium like this before. It wasn't in the 1997 anime, or the Golden Age movies, or the 2016 anime. They just completely skipped it altogether. So seeing it come to life like this was just absolutely brilliant, and I loved it so much. And the way in which they did it is totally feasible for movies in the anime. So it makes me wonder why they didn't try to attempt this in the past. They could have eliminated some of the more gruesome, some of the more egregious aspects of his character, but they chose not to do that. They just chose to, quote-unquote, eliminate him from the universe altogether. Now, at the end of the Golden Age arc, you end up fighting Femto, which is no surprise. The battle itself, though, is a pain in the ass. I'm not gonna lie about that. See, there's these things that come out of the ground and they slow down your movement. So you're moving really slow, trying to cut down all these apostles. Meanwhile, Griffith is sitting in the middle here and you gotta find a way to hit him. But it's not so easy because you're moving slow, you gotta cut your way through apostles, and he's sending these like tornadoes / waves at you that sort of like repel you backwards. So yeah, I'm not gonna lie, the first time that I went through this, a couple of obscenities were being thrown around. Now, one of the unique things about this game is that you can go back to previous missions at any point in the game. For example, in the early stages of the game, you only might be like level 11 and you might be struggling with some of those missions. But if you were to progress to level 20 and then go back to that mission, it'd be a heck of a lot easier. But instead of progressing further in the game itself, you can actually do this thing called Endless Eclipse. Essentially, you take one character and you're supposed to delve 100 layers into the eclipse. And you gotta do it in one go. You can't die once. Okay, so there's a bit of a caveat to that. There's check marks every 20 layers. But even then, it's still quite hard. Because each subsequent 20 layers, you're fighting massive bosses. So bosses that you fought in the story mode, like Wyald and Zod, become part of the layers itself. And you're taking damage in those layers, you only got so many items to heal yourself, and you gotta make it 20 layers, otherwise you gotta do it all over again. But it is a very fun challenge that I really enjoyed. Now I gotta say, Guts was probably the funnest character to play with. He's got the right combination of speed and power. He can get off quick attacks, do his cannon blast, and go into a frenzy pretty quickly. And his frenzy attack is really nice, where he pulls back his sword and just like slices everyone in the area. As for some of the other characters, you know, they got their quirks, they got their advantages and disadvantages. Zod's really nice, his attacks are really powerful. However, each attack is very methodical. He really likes to pull back his sword all the way and then do a massive swing. So whereas Guts can get off like several attacks in a row, Zod's only getting off like 2 or 3 in a row, and it's kind of slow and labored. So if you find yourself in a group of people, instead of slaughtering everyone, you more oftentimes than not find yourself going back for an attack and then getting attacked by someone else and then getting stalled, which really sucks. Now, if you're looking for a speed character, you want to go with like Judo or Griffith. They're getting off several attacks in a row, but as you would expect, their attacks are not so strong. Now, in terms of the game mechanics, what you're trying to do here is you're trying to fill up this gauge on the bottom here. Once you fill up this gauge, you hit the circle button, and this allows you to go into a frenzied attack. You know, so you're kind of crackling with this reddish-black lightning, your attacks are much stronger, you're attacking faster. It's almost like a form of Kaioken in the Berserk universe. And then when you fill up this meter on the left here, this little like lightning bolt here, you go for the death blow. So essentially what you want to do is you want to fill up the frenzy meter as fast as possible by killing enemies. Then you go into frenzy mode. And then you want to kill more enemies so that you can fill up the death blow meter. And now you're thinking to yourself, do I want to save the death blows or use them? Well, here's the thing. If you use them while you're in a frenzy, you can continue the frenzy and build up the death blow meter again. So it's in your best interest to use that death blow as quickly as possible so that you can build up the meter again and use another one. Now for a character like Zod who has very slow methodical attacks, that death blow meter goes up very slowly. Whereas Guts, who attacks very fast and powerfully, it goes up pretty quickly. I mean, sometimes you can get 3 death blows in one frenzy. Now each character has their own death blow attack. And by far, I gotta say the best 2 are Guts and Zod, with the worst one being Casca. In fact, she's pretty much the worst character in the game by far. And I hate to say it because I love her as a character in the manga, but in the game she is just so weak and her death blow attack is just awful. In fact, not only does it suck in terms of damage, it's kind of a demoralizing attack. What do I mean by this? So for every death blow, you know, the character like rears back and they do this massive blow that kills everyone in the vicinity. For Casca, she pulls back her sword and leads a couple of troops to just ram into the enemy. And they can only ram in one direction, so if you happen to be facing the wrong direction when you use the death blow, it's completely useless. Whereas Guts, even if you're facing the wrong way, it's a circular attack that gets everyone within a certain radius. So it's gonna be effective no matter what. Whereas Casca, you gotta line it up just perfectly, and even then the attack still sucks. So I kind of feel bad for her. I wish they did better by her in this game, but unfortunately it is what it is. And I'm really not looking forward to my Endless Eclipse playthrough with Casca because she's just not that good in this game. And I wish it was the other way around. I wish she was a better character to use, but they just didn't make it that way. After you start building yourself up through the Endless Eclipse, what I like to do is I like to toggle between the story and the Endless Eclipse. That way I can build up my character, mostly Guts, and then when I go back to the story again, specific missions and bosses get a lot easier. Now back on track with the story itself, when you get to the Black Swordsman arc, it's a lot of fun. Fighting the Snake Baron and the Count was just absolutely thrilling and I loved it so much. What's kind of weird about that arc is that I found the Snake Baron to be a harder boss than the Count. Which is kind of weird because you would think it would be the other way around. But in terms of the Count, he was very massive and imposing. It's just he was a giant blob and it was very easy to hit him and he wasn't very mobile. So you just kind of hacked and slashed him until he was dead. Whereas with the Snake Baron, he was very mobile and he had a tail that could just whip the hell out of you. I can't tell you the amount of times that this guy would just freaking send me flying back time after time again. And I couldn't get any freaking attacks off, and then sometimes I would get stuck in a corner, and then it was like, what the frick, man? What do I do with this guy? So yeah, Snake Baron boss, really hard. Count, not so much. But both were fun fights nonetheless. Now, when you get to the Conviction arc, there's one big thing that they omitted. I understand why they did it, but I think they still could have done it with some modifications. The thing that they skipped was the Rosine fight. In fact, the whole Lost Children's chapters are just skipped altogether. And given all the fun boss fights, I'm not sure why they skipped this one. Most likely, it's because of the imagery. I mean, we all know from the manga that that sort of imagery is a little bit of a hot topic, especially in the West. Understandably so. I think another thing that might have been hard for the game makers was that Rosine is a flying apostle. Every other apostle that I can think of in the game is ground-based. But having a flying apostle in the air that you would have had to attack with your sword might have posed some difficulties. So I'm guessing it's just something that they didn't want to undergo and something that might have been a little bit difficult to pull off. I mean, they could have had just her like levitating over the ground by like 1 foot, giving the appearance of flying. I guess, you know, they just decided that it wasn't an avenue that they wanted to go to. So anyway, after wrapping up the Black Swordsman arc, we're into the Conviction arc. Now, all the battles are what you would expect of the Conviction arc. When you do fight Mosgus, I am a little bit surprised that you didn't fight his disciples. I thought at some point you would fight his disciples and then fight Mosgus, but unfortunately they skipped the disciples altogether. But it is really cool because as you're making your way to Mosgus, you're being chased by the various slimy, oozing spirits that are going around the castle. So you got some really nice imagery here, and the fight with Mosgus is really fun. Not too hard, which is nice, but just a really fun, entertaining fight. And then after the fight, you got the very magnificent scene in which Griffith is reborn into his human form again. So again, really nice imagery. You got the image of Zod bursting through the castle, Skull Knight as he's pointing guts over to the newly born Griffith, and then finally Griffith flying away on Zod. So really nice stuff once again, really well executed, really loved everything about that. And then we have the fight on the Hill of Swords with Zod. So it's a fight in his human form and his apostle form, so really nice stuff there. And then Guts decides to take Casca away from Goto's house and venture off on his own. And there we get to see the Beast of Darkness, and then Guts has to fight off some various bandits to save Casca. And then afterwards, Farnese, Serpico, and Isidro officially join the party. Then the party makes its way over to the mansion of the Spirit Tree, which is really fun because you get to fight various golems and trolls and such. You then make your way over to Enoch Village, and two really fun boss fights happen here. The first one being with the Kelpie, and the second one being with the giant ogre. And I should also mention as well that once you get to this part of the game with Shirka and the rest of the crew, you get some new playable characters, one of which being Shirka and the other one being Serpico. Now Shirka is really interesting because she's a magician. She's not a fighter like the rest of the characters in the game. She doesn't have a sword, she doesn't have explosives, she's got magic. So her main attacks include like a water tornado, fire, moving the earth up. So it's really fascinating stuff. I really liked it. It kind of takes a while to get used to playing with her character because every other character you're using a sword. And when you're using a sword, you got to get really close to the enemies so that you can do the hacking and slashing. But when you're Shirka, you actually want to keep a distance from the enemies because most of her attacks include long range attacks. And then her death blow attack is probably one of the best in the game. You know, she'll cast this magical spell and then it just sort of like rains down on all the enemies, and it seems to cover a very large area, so basically anyone in the large area is just automatically dead. So really nice final attack for Shirka. Now I didn't play too much with her in the game, but I would imagine with her specific attacks that if you find yourself in a crowd of a lot of enemies, it's probably pretty difficult to work your way out of that, unless you have the death blow available to you. And then after the events at Enoch Village, you then make your way to the Troll Den, otherwise known as Quithoth. And Quithoth is really interesting because, as many of you know, we get to fight Slan there. Now, seeing Slan in the game was absolutely fantastic. Really well done on the animation. Really liked her. Really liked the cutscenes as well. Her as a final boss is, I don't know, a bit of a letdown. Just because Femto was so hard to fight in the Eclipse and it was such a challenge that I was expecting a lot more from Slan, but it was actually rather easy. And I don't know if it was more so that I was just getting stronger in the game and that Guts was just so OP at that point that it wasn't much of a challenge, but there really wasn't much to it. She would stay in one fixed location, you would fight her, you would do a certain amount of damage to her, she would teleport to another location, so you would move around and then just attack her again. Yeah, there just wasn't much to it. You could attack her rather easily, she could sort of send you back with some of her attacks, but it was really nothing special. Again, I would say that the Snake Baron was a tougher boss than Slan. In fact, besides Femto, the Snake Baron was the toughest boss in the game, which is sort of a failure from a developer standpoint because, yes, the Snake Baron should be a tough boss, but tougher than the Count and Slan? I mean, Slan is a member of the God Hand, for God's sakes. I mean, she should be the second toughest boss fights in the entire game. I get it wasn't the full version of Slan, she was made out of troll intestines, but still. And if you remember from the manga, she caused Guts a spiritual wound. no other apostle was able to do that besides Slan. So Slan's difficulty should be a lot higher, especially compared to the Snake Baron. But I kind of found her on the level of like the Count and the Makara. They didn't really pose much of a threat, unfortunately. So anyway, after you're done with Slan and Quathoth, you make your way back to the Mansion of the Spirit Tree. And then here you get to fight Grunbeld. Now, in terms of a boss fight, I kind of have a mixed reaction to this one. So you fight him in two phases. You fight him as your regular gut self, and then you fight him with the Berserker armor. Now, when you're fighting him just as Guts, without the Berserker armor, it's kind of a tough fight. I mean, it's got its challenges, but he's just a big, hulking man that swings very slowly. So it's very easy to get shots in when he's, raring up to swing at you. And then when you get the Berserker armor, now that's definitely one of the coolest power-ups in the game, but you are moving so fast and powerfully as the Berserker that Grunbeld is not even really much of a challenge. I mean, I was probably able to get off like 50 shots before he swung at me. And then when he transforms into his dragon apostle form, again, he's just a big laboring beast. It just wasn't much of a challenge. Again, I would say that the Snake Baron was stronger than Grunbeld. Regardless, it was still fighting Grunbeld and seeing him in his apostle form. From a difficulty level, it just really wasn't there, unfortunately. So anyway, afterwards you make your way to the beach, you fight the Pishasha, the Kushan sorcerers, and the Makara. All are really fun battles in their own right. We then make our way over to Virtanis, where we enter the last phase of the game. Now, one of the interesting things about the Serpico fight is that to get one of the Beyblade achievements, you have to beat him without using any of your sub-weapons. So you can't use the cannon or the little bombs or the arrows, you just have to use your sword. And if you remember from the manga, Serpico got an advantage on Guts by fighting in a room with a bunch of pillars. And it's the same thing here. So swinging your sword is a little bit more difficult in this area, but it's rather easy to knock down the pillars, and once you knock down enough of them, it's just your basic standard fight at that point. But Serpico is a pretty tough foe. He's got his own challenges, so I really enjoyed this one. After you defeat Serpico and he's back on your team again, you collect Farnese, and then it's time for the final battle. And this final battle is pretty hectic. I mean, there is a lot going on. The map is very convoluted and intricate, and you got a lot of different objectives that you got to attend to. You gotta defeat some sorcerers, you gotta defeat some war demons, you gotta make sure that your party's okay and that they're not gonna die, and eventually you get to a point where Ganishka is shooting down lightning from the sky. So yeah, there's a lot going on here, and it's very easy to sort of lose yourself in the battle and sort of forget what you're doing. But eventually you defeat all the enemies, you collect your allies, and you make your way over to the boat dock. After doing so, you finally confront the final boss of the game, Ganishka. But before you fight him, you get that very iconic scene where you jump on top of Zod and you go through Ganishka's forehead. So I'm really glad that they included this into the game because it's such an iconic scene. And now, I gotta say for the fight with Ganishka, probably the third hardest in the game. So first hardest would be Femto, second Snake Baron, third Ganishka. And the fight itself was really entertaining. I like how they did it. So he's essentially this giant cloud that's shooting lightning at you. And as you continue to get his HP bar down, he shoots more and more lightning and starts to blow you back, so it gets harder and harder. But eventually, like all the boss fights, you go berserk, you defeat him, and that's it for the game. You get on Roderick's boat. Unfortunately, you don't get to see Roderick in this game, but you get on Roderick's boat and it cuts to the end credits, and that's the end of the game. So after you're done with the story mode of the game, the last thing to do is to collect achievements. And most of those achievements are going to be found in the Endless Eclipse. Now you have 8 playable characters in the game: Guts, Griffith, Judo, Casca, Wyald, Shirka, Zod, and Serpico. So 8 playable characters, and to get all those achievements, you need to go 100 layers into the Endless Eclipse with each character. So I repeat that, that's 800 total layers of the Eclipse that you have to play through. So as you would expect, it's a bit of a grind, it's a little bit tedious, but if you're willing to put in the effort, you can get all those achievements. I will say layers 1 through 80 are not too bad. But as you get up to those higher layers, and like I said, you can save after every 20 layers. So once you get to layer 80, you can restart with fresh stats, all your healing stuff, you can upgrade your weapons again, and then you go in for that final grind. And the last 5 layers in particular, 96 through 100, are particularly hard. That's because every final layer has a very tough boss. You got the Snake Baron, you got Zod, and finally you finish up with Griffith. Now, there's a little bit of a quote-unquote cheat to this. What you can do is you got these various salves, and salves replenish your vitality. Now, what you do is that you use one of the salves, you quickly save and quit, and then you come back into the game. Now, you get the benefit of healing yourself, but you also get to keep the salve as well. So essentially, when you get to those final layers, you can heal yourself completely, save and quit, and then you'll still have the salves again, which is pretty much essential for layers 99 and 100. 99 not so much, I would say. That one's against Zod, which Zod is a very tough fight, but by that point in the game, I could go Berserk pretty quick and replenish the death blow gauge fast enough where I was getting off like 3 or 4 attacks, and it was like he couldn't even really touch me at that point. Femto, on the other hand, on level 100 is much more difficult. Even after replenishing all my stats and everything like that, having all my salves available to me, I had to use every single last one of them just to get through that fight. He's got these bubbles that are like homing devices that just keep following you. He keeps repelling you backwards. Every time that you try to attack him, he's defending and he's got like a shield against you. So it's just hard to get off strikes. And even once you get into the frenzy mode, it's hard to get the death blow gauge up because as soon as you start attacking, he repels you back. And then you gotta run up to him again and you're wasting time. So yeah, it was a hard freaking fight. And that was with Guts, guys. Trying to do this with like, say, Serpico or Casca, I'm not looking forward to that one, but, we'll see how it goes. So after you're done with the story mode and the grind of the Eclipse, there's one last thing you can do in the game. And that's this little puck minigame here. It's kind of a nice little reprieve from all the hacking and slashing, and as far as I can tell, not a lot of people are aware of this. So what you gotta do here is go into the gallery, click on events, and then click on one of these events right here. And then it starts the puck minigame, which is called Betchy Catch. And it's pretty self-explanatory. You're just guiding puck across the screen and catching all the Betchies that you can, all the Baylets. So yeah, it is a fun little distraction from all the hacking and slashing that is this game. So yeah, guys, that's about it for Berserk and the Band of the Hawk. Really nice game. Like I said, it's not an overly complex game. It's not going to be like Elden Ring or Baldur's Gate 3. It's not going to be overly intricate and be, a candidate for Game of the Year. It's just a very fun, entertaining game that, if you're a lover of Berserk, you can play and enjoy. Now, if you are new to the Berserk universe, and I probably should have said this at the beginning of the video, I would recommend not playing this game until you've read the manga. Even though this game covers the main plot points of the manga, it skips a lot of material that is essential to the Berserk universe. One of the big things that we talked about was the Lost Children's chapters with Rosine, so you don't want to miss out on those key moments. So as for a final review of the game, I would give this a solid 7 out of 10, which is a very good score. Is it worth $60? Probably not. It was just recently on sale on the PlayStation Store for $23.99, but I don't believe that sale is still going on right now. I was actually able to borrow a copy from a friend at work, so it kind of worked out nicely for me that way. I didn't have to pay for it. But I would say at some point when it does go on sale, if you are a Berserk fan, this is a good game to pick up. Even if you just want to pick it up for Christmas at full price. So tell me if you guys have played this Berserk game in the comments. Tell me if you played this sort of Berserk Guts' Rage. I'd really like to hear your feedback on that one. I have been considering buying an old Dreamcast just so I could play that game. That being said, with the Dreamcast and the game, I'm looking at about $200, so that's a bit on the pricey side, but if you tell me in the comments that it's worth it, I might just do that. So anyway guys, thanks for watching the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you on the flip side.